I get asked a lot about the process of how I go through and edit my podcast, specifically my video podcast and my audio podcast. But here's the thing. I edit them both at the same time. And not only do I edit them both at the same time, but by using DaVinci Resolve, I have a very easily replicatable process that I can go through and repeat each and every week so that my podcast is consistent. And that's something that I think that my viewers and my listeners really appreciate it. So in today's episode, I'm going to go through and show you all the way from beginning to end how I edit my podcast. It's going to be a long one, so buckle up. And if you have questions something that I don't cover, leave it in the comments down below, and maybe I'll address it in a future video. Let's get started. So the first thing that I have to do is I have to download the files from Riverside, which is the sponsor of today's episode. Riverside is a podcast recording platform that records all of your files locally and then uploads them so that you and whoever you are talking to can get the highest possible quality video and audio when recording your podcast without having to know how to do it. I've used a million different solutions for recording podcasts with other people over the internet, and Riverside is the one that I find works the best and gives the best quality. Now, I do think it is worth pointing out that not everybody needs to use a program like DaVinci Resolve in order to edit their podcast. In fact, if you don't know how to edit video at all, one of the coolest things about Riverside is they have a built-in editor that will essentially edit your podcast for you. All you have to do is click on that edit button like I showed you just a second ago, and then you're going to be greeted with the complete transcript of your entire show right over here on the left-hand side, as well as what it's going to look like. If I want, I can change the layouts or I can change my tracks around so I can, you'll notice that I'm over here on the bottom left, but I'm facing to the left. And so I prefer to be on the right-hand side of the screen. So I'm just going to move myself up, and now I'm on the right-hand side of the screen facing to the left. I don't think it matters, but it's just a personal preference for what I like to do. I can also go through and say, all right, well, Carrie, who's also known as the Fox, if I click on this, I can clean up his audio with one click. This is all stuff that I'm going to be doing manually in DaVinci Resolve later, but you don't have to do it manually. You can just use Riverside's built-in stuff. I can also go into the layout and I can do picture in picture, which will make one person big and everybody else small. And then it automatically will edit when somebody switches from talking, like when I stop talking and say somebody else starts talking, they will take over the big spot and I would take over one of their smaller spots. So if I jump ahead, you can see that this guy, Carrie, is talking, and it pushed me into a smaller window. Now, if you notice, when you hover over this, we've got little purple icon outline. I can actually drag this around. This is a new feature where if I decide that, I want Russ to be in the big frame instead of Carrie, maybe the editor made a mistake. I can click on it and drag it over here, and it'll swap them. And it's just super, super easy to make those changes. And I like it a lot. Then whenever you are ready to export, one thing that I would always say that you should do is normalize your audio levels. This makes sure that your listeners or your viewers don't have to constantly turn the volume up and down based on who's talking or how loudly they're talking. And then if you have some background noise, like one of the people on the show is using a condenser microphone, which picks up a lot of ambient noise in the room, I can click on remove background noise and it will get rid of that background noise so you can't hear it when they're talking. It's a really great feature. And on top of that, you can also add B-roll. And this is another new feature that Riverside recently added where you can go into your uploads and then you can grab a video that you've uploaded and you can drag that onto your timeline and have B-roll while you're talking about something, which is really useful. So whether you're making video podcasts or audio podcasts or like me doing both, you might want to give Riverside a try. It's really easy to use. There's a link in the description down below, which will save you 15% off. And a huge thank you to Riverside for sponsoring this video. I've put out plenty of episodes where Riverside has done the editing for me, and I think it's fantastic, but I prefer just a little more control. That little more control comes with a lot of extra work, but I think it pays off sometimes. So I still use Riverside to record my podcast, but then instead of going into the editor, what I usually will do is I will just come down here to my recording files. It's going to show me all of my recording files, and I click on Export All and then Download Tracks. Once I click that, it's going to take like 10, 15 minutes to zip all of the tracks together, and then I can download them. And now that I've got them downloaded, let me open up Finder. You can see them right here. This is the file that I downloaded. I'm going to double click on it. And then once it's done, I'm going to have my folder here. And if you look, each person is going to have a bunch of different files. Now, most of these are extra that we really don't need. So what I like to do is I'm going to open this in a different, I'm going to open this in a different tab, open a new tab, drag it off to the side. And then I go into my video tab and I go into my interview tab. And then in here, I double click and you see this, it says Bill Raw Synced. I grab that file, drop it in there. I do the same thing for this, for that speaker. Same thing for this speaker. I'm just grabbing the first video file that shows up. And I'm going to go ahead and close that now. And now I have all of these. So what then I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to delete that folder because I really don't need that folder. And I'm going to delete that zip file because I really don't need that zip file. And they are taking up a bunch of room on my hard drive. So once I've got that, I can get rid of Chrome and I can close this, and I'm going to make a new podcast. I'm going to hit new project. I'm going to just call this example podcast. And now I'm going to go into DaVinci Resolve. I'm going to go over here to my media pool, and over here on the left-hand side, you see this thing that says favorites. In order to put things here in the favorites, you're just going to find them over here and you can just drag them down to your favorites. Now, I'm not actually going to do that because I've already got that, but my projects are right here. And if you look, I have a folder called How I Edit My Podcast. So I'm going to double click on that. And then I'm going to click on video and I'm going to drag that down here to on the left-hand side where it says master. This is the bin for this particular podcast. Once it's there, I jump over to the edit tab. I'm going to close the index, open up my media pool, and I'm going to click on interview. And you can see that I have all of the files right there. Now, the next thing that I like to do is I'm going to grab my video. I'm going to drag it onto the timeline, start it at the beginning. Then I'm going to grab the next speaker, line them up. And now they're all lined up. And as you can see, if I move this up, I'm waiting for the waveforms to get built. You can see my waveform's been built. And if I zoom out, if you look at this, you can see our audio levels are very different levels. And that is because we all have different microphones. We all have different voices. We're all recording in different rooms or different locations, and we all have different voices. And because of that, we want to be able to edit our audio on a per track basis, which I will show you how to do that later. This is one of the reasons that I switched from Final Cut Pro over to DaVinci Resolve, is because just the audio editing is so much better. But now that I've got those included, you can probably notice that they're all just stacked on top of each other, which is really not how we want, because if you look, we've got Russ here, and I'm going to deactivate his layer. The other people are all underneath. So what we need to do is put these people into different sections of the screen if I want to have everybody on screen all at once. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to my media pool, and I'm going to come down to my power bins. Now, you won't have this in your power bins, but after you've made effects or you have effects that you like to use, if you drag them into your power bins, and if you don't see power bins here, you just click on this 3 dots and you click on show power bins right here. Make sure that that has a check next to it. The cool thing about power bins is whatever you put in there is available in every single project that you make, which is very, very useful. So if you look here, I have this power bin, which is labeled podcast camera positions. And in order to do this, before I grab these and use them, I'm going to right click and I'm going to add tracks. And I am going to say add tracks, multiple tracks, instead of just add track, because that gives me the ability to pick where the tracks go. So I'm going to say add tracks. I'm going to add one video track, and I'm going to add that below my first track. And then I'm going to add one audio track. I'm going to make sure that it's stereo because that's going to be my podcast music. And I'm going to have that be above the first track. So basically, what's going to happen is I'm going to take all of these tracks and I'm going to shift them away from the middle. So I'm going to hit add tracks, and you can see those there. Now, let's label each track. So this is going to be music. This is going to be Bill, that's me. And this one is Carrie. And this one is Rich. And this one is Russ. Once I have all of those labeled, the reason I'm labeling that is because later when we go to edit the audio, if you look over here on the right-hand side, and I always have trouble dragging this, you drag that out, you can see each channel is labeled so you can apply your effects to each channel individually, which we'll come back and do that later. So now that I've got that set up, what I'm going to put here in this blank track is I'm going to drag, there's 4 of us, so I need somebody on the bottom left, the bottom right, the top left, and the top right. So I'm going to grab each one of those, and I'm going to drag it underneath. And you might be wondering, why would I drag it underneath? I'm going to explain why in just a second. Okay, so let's say I wanted somebody to be on the top right. If I drag this up above and then put my playhead at that, you can see it's moved everything to the top right. But that means it moves everything that's underneath it. So all 4 of these. This is called an adjustment clip. Okay, so an adjustment clip, it adjusts everything that's underneath it. That's why I put them underneath this. Now, why am I making adjustment clips like this? Well, because my adjustment clips, they have all of the settings that I already wanted to make. So let me show you how to make the adjustment clip that we're talking about here. So this one, and if you click on here, I have OpenFX and then transform. So it says OpenFX transform. So I'm going to recreate this over here so you can see what it, like how I made this. All right. So this is OpenFX transform. So I'm going to go to my effects, OpenFX. I'm going to click on that. And then I'm going to click on the search and I'm going to type transform, and it's right here. I'm going to drop it on there. So now it gives me all of these options. So I can change my zoom level. I can shrink it down to however small that I want it. I can also move it to the right, to the right, or I can move it to the left. I can move it up or down, and you can also go into your image adjustment and then go crop. And instead of actually cropping, I just like to increase the roundness on the corners. So if you look right here, you can see the corners roundness is changing because I'd like to have just a little bit of roundness on the corners. I think it looks a little bit better. And then finally, I'm going to come back over here to my favorites. And I'm going to grab this drop shadow. It's a Resolve FX stylize. So if you were looking for that, and you just click on your Resolve FX. So I'm going to type drop shadow here. And that's not where it is. OpenFX, drop shadow. It's under OpenFX. And any effect that you really like, you can just click on this star and it'll save it down here in your favorites. So if there's something that you use all the time, like I constantly use drop shadows, where to go? Right here. I constantly use drop shadows, then you want to have that. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to drop it on my adjustment clip. But I can't show you the drop shadow because currently anything that I put on the screen is going to be adjusted by this adjustment clip. So you can't actually show that yet. So now that you've seen how I make an adjustment clip, and then I take this adjustment clip and I saved it. So if I come over here, podcast camera positions, I can grab that adjustment clip and just drop it in there if I want, but I'm not going to because it's not something I'm going to use. I'm actually going to delete that. We're going to come back to this one, which is the top right. Now, why did I do all that? I put it underneath. I hit Command C or Control C if you're on Windows. And then I'm going to click on somebody and put them in the top right. So I'm going to select my friend Russ here. And instead of Command V, I'm going to hit Option V. And it's going to open up this. This is going to paste my attributes. And I'm going to say video attributes. Just click all of them. And if I hit apply, now you can see the drop shadows there. And he's moved up to the top right. So now I got to look for bottom right. And I'm zoomed out a little bit too far. So I can't see, there we go, the names. So here's bottom right. I'm going to do Command C, click on a person, Option V, apply. You can't see what happened because I did that, whoops, to a track that is invisible. So I did it right there to that one. Next, I'm going to do bottom left, Command C, Option V, and then one more, which would be top left, Command C, whoops, Command C, and then Option V. And I hit apply. So now all 4 people are where they need to be. I'm going to zoom back out, actually not that far, and I'm going to select these 4 things and just delete them because I don't need them anymore. Next, I want to put a background that goes underneath everybody. This is why I added this track to the bottom, because now if I go into my effects, these are just some things that I've already saved. I have this, like basically like a wallpaper, but I'm going to grab this. I'm going to put it right down here. And you can see it doesn't take up the whole podcast, but Command C, go to the end of that clip by pushing down. And then I'm just going to hit Command V a bunch of times until it fills up the whole thing. You might say, well, nothing's happening. And that's because I'm at the end of the clip each time. All right. Well, now that I'm there, if I click on this, now you can see that we have this background underneath us. If I hit play, you can see the podcast is happening and we've got this little animated thing happening underneath and you're all set. Then I'm going to go back into Riverside. All right. Again, Riverside has this really cool transcription feature. So I'm going to go edit, create new edit. And then I remember that when we were having this conversation, somebody said something very funny. And I said, oh, that's the intro. Because what I usually like to do is find some clip that's in the middle of the episode and that might be funny or interesting. And I put that at the very beginning of the episode, just a small clip and then the intro. And then we jump into the actual show. So I'm going to click on this search button right here and I'm going to type intro. And there's 4 results. And you can see right here, I said, and there's the intro. And that happened at about 29 minutes into the podcast. So why is that important? Well, I'm going to go ahead and close that. And I shouldn't have moved those yet, but I'm going to go to about 29 minutes. All right. So that's right around there. And I'm going to find the intro. All right. There's the intro right there. I heard myself say there's the intro. So then I'm going to hit W and you'll notice, let me hit undo. I have all 4 of us selected and I hit W and that cuts and makes that into 2 clips. And then I'm going to rewind a little bit.
It converts your PSVR to converts your PSVR.
And then he says it converts your PSVR 2 into PSVR 1. It's kind of funny. So now I'm just going to hit W again. And you might be wondering, well, what just happened? Well, if I zoom way in, now I have these clips. This is the intro of the show. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to click right here. I'm going to click and drag and grab all of them, move them to the right. Then I'm going to click these, copy, Shift Z to zoom out, paste that right there. There's the intro.
It converts your PSVR2 to a PSVR1.
All right, so there's our intro. Now at the end of the intro, I'm going to cut those off. All right, so W, highlight those, delete. What do I want to do now? Well, now I'm going to grab my asset for like my logo, and I'm going to drag that on top of this. Actually, let me put that over there. I'm going to click on this so I have my two windows. This is my source window. This is my timeline window. And I'm going to double click on Nerd Nest intro 10 seconds. And that's right there. And then I only want the video part. I don't want the audio part. So I'm going to click on this and drag it down. I don't need the audio. There's blank audio anyway. So then if I click on this, you're going to notice, if I get rid of that, there's no drop shadow there. So I'm going to go into my effects, my favorites, come down here, grab the drop shadow and drop it on there. And now there's a bit of a drop shadow, but I think it's a little too... Is there a drop shadow? No, I didn't actually. I must have missed. What? There we go. Okay, I double click it instead. Now, if you look over here under on our inspector, if you don't see the inspector and you click this, it'll pop up. I've got effects, open effects, and drop shadows turned on, and I can change anything I want about the drop shadow. So I'll make it a little less blurry. I'll make it a little stronger of a shadow and lower the distance a little bit, maybe increase the blur just a little bit. I like the way that looks. Then I'm just going to move this to the left. That's not the left. To the left and shrink it down just a touch. So then this is the intro. You see it pop up there. Next, I need to grab the rest of the podcast and bring it back. So I'll grab all of those. Actually, I don't even need to. If I click on this, it's going to select the gap. And if I hit backspace, it will bring everything to the right of that gap over to the left. But you'll notice it also, watch this, it also deleted these things called wallpaper. So I'm going to show you that one more time. That's a problem. The reason that that's a problem is because this is a perfectly looped wallpaper, right? So a perfectly looped wallpaper, well, if I'm cutting it in the middle of it and then changing it, well, it's not going to be a perfect loop anymore. So instead of clicking the gap and just hitting delete, I'm going to click and drag this over. And once it hits if I have snapping on, which is this little magnet here, so you turn it on or off. If I have it on, when it gets to my playhead, it'll just lock there. And now if I zoom in, you can see my intro. And now the logo pops up and there's going to be music, which we'll add in a little bit. And then there's the beginning of the show. So now we have most of the show made if I'm not going through and adding B-roll and everything to the podcast, which is something that I do, but it's very time consuming and I'm not going to show that on screen right now. You know what? I will show one part on screen. So let's say in this part of the show right here, we're talking about Monster Hunter Wilds, which is a new video game. So what I would do is I would go into my media pool and I would come to my power bins and I have a folder called B-roll. And then I'm going to go to games and then game trailers and I'll find the Monster Hunter Wilds footage, double click it, grab this, put it on top. And now when we're talking, I'm just going to mute this. When we're talking, and then we start talking about this particular game, you can see that it is going to switch over to the B-roll, but that's covering the whole screen. Maybe I don't want to cover the whole screen. So here's my solution for that. What I do is I just select one of the four of us. I'm going to hit Command C. I'm going to click on my B-roll. I'm going to hit Option V. And this is going to do the same thing that we did before, where it's going to shrink it down. So now it's covering up one of us. Okay, but I don't want it to cover up one of us. I want it to be in the middle of all of us. So I click on the track, or not the track, but the clip. I'm going to come over here to effects, and I'm going to, if you look, my position X and position Y is 0.250, 0.250, which moves it to the upper right quadrant of the screen. If I just hit reset on both of those, it moves it to the middle, but it's a little too big, like it's covering up Rich's face and covering up, it's covering up too much of everything. But that's okay because we have zoom right here, currently set to 0.450. All I'm gonna do is click on the numbers, drag to the left until I feel like that's the right size. And now I've got the B-roll, and it automatically has, if I close this, it automatically has a drop shadow and rounded corners because I copied it from one of the 4 people, which made it so much easier. And I can, do that, with, if maybe we're talking about a different game at this point, I grab that clip, I Command C, Option V, apply. So then when we get to this point, it's going to show us another clip. And I go through and I do that for every single game that we're talking about on the podcast, because I know that our audience likes to see the games that we're talking about while we're talking about them if they're watching on YouTube. When you are doing this, if you're making your podcast with YouTube in mind, it's also important to make sure that you're not requiring that your audience sees the things that are on the screen in order to get the most out of it. So even though we're talking about a game and I'm showing it on the screen, we're not referring to what we're seeing during the show, because for the audio listeners, that would be a bad experience. Now, speaking of audio, we got to find some music to put in this. So I'm going to go back to my intro. Here's my intro right here. And I've got my channel for music. In order to grab some music, I'm going to go into my power bins, effects, and here's a song. I'm going to click that song and drag it right over here. So what I want to see is, what does it sound like when the intro clicks in, right? So take a look. I'm looking for something right there. Did you hear that? I want that to come in when the Nerd Nest logo pops up. So I'm going to click here. Actually, just to show you what I mean, I'm going to click my playhead right here. This is what I'm looking at, is where my playhead is. And I'm just going to hit a marker. You see that little blue tag there. And then I'm just going to drag that blue marker. Well, I was going to drag it to the left, but I can't because the track is too long. So I'll just cut off the beginning of it, bring this to the left, and then bring that all the way out to the beginning. Okay, so the song is actually not starting right in the middle. So here's the intro, which I like, but the music is completely covering up what we're saying here in this part. So all I do is I click on this right here, and I'm going to drag it to the left. And this point right here where my playhead is, that is the point where it switches over and we're not talking anymore. So I usually go just a little bit past that. And then if you look at this little gray dot right here, it's kind of hard to see. If you click on that gray dot, you can change the shape of the curve that changes the volume of the music. So I'm going to have it slowly increase. So it'll be very, very quiet here, and then it'll get louder and louder and louder. So I'm going to hit play. All right. And then I'm going to hit zoom, get the appropriate amount of zoom. Let me go ahead and close my media pool so I can see a little bit more. And I'm going to get rid of all of this extra music because we don't need that during the show. This is just intro music. And then do the same thing just on the other side. Now let's go back. Hey, everybody, welcome. All right, and then here's the intro. Now, you might think to yourself, well, you're still kind of hard to hear over the music. That's because I haven't mastered everything yet. I haven't gotten all of my levels exactly where I want, and I do that on a per-track basis. So then I click this right here, which is my logo and the music, and I hit Command C, Shift Z to zoom all the way back out, go all the way to the end of the show.
Against Flyers.
And I got to find where the show actually stops. All right, there's the end. So I'm just going to zoom in. I'm going to select all 4 of these, hit W, and then hit backspace. Now, somebody might say, well, Bill, how come you don't just use your trim the end or trim the beginning shortcuts? That's because if I do that, it will usually mess with this wallpaper, which goes underneath. And I'm not doing a lot of cuts during the podcast. I just let the podcast go naturally. All right. So now that I've got that done, I've copied from before. Now I'm going to paste it in the intro, music, and the logo. And I will click both of these. Whoops, wrong button. I click both of these. And I'm going to drag them to the left. And this is going to be the very end of my podcast right here. So I'm going to click on the wallpaper. I'm going to hit E to delete the rest of that. I'm going to click on the music. I'm going to hit E to delete the rest of that. And then I'm going to grab this handle and drag it to the end. And what I usually do is I will have the music fade in the opposite direction at the very end. And I think that that's probably good. I'll do it a little bit more. All right, so the podcast is essentially edited now. All I have to do now is get my audio levels right. So now we're going to jump into Fairlight. So I'm going to click on Fairlight. And in Fairlight, over here on the right-hand side, if you don't see all of these, then you got to click on this and drag it to the left. And now I can see all of my different channels. You see that we have, if I zoom out, there's something on audio 6. That right there, if you look, that is the B-roll. I forgot and I dragged in the audio for that B-roll. So what I'm just gonna do is I'm gonna go into my edit tab and I'm gonna come down here and I'm going to right click, unlink, and then I'll just delete the audio. And now you can see the audio 6 is completely empty. If you right click, you can say delete empty tracks and it will delete any tracks that don't have anything in them. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and it gets rid of audio 6. All right. Now, in order to get your music or your audio sounding good, you're going to have to edit each person individually because everybody's in different locations with different microphones and different voices. And so that's one of the reasons, this is the reason that I switched to Resolve over Final Cut, is because it made track editing. Instead of editing individual clips, I can edit the entire track at once, and it makes it just so much easier. And they're really powerful tools. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at mine, which is this track right here. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to click on voice isolation. I can't remember if voice isolation is part of the free part of DaVinci Resolve or the paid version. But I do this every single week, so it was worth the paid version for me. I'm going to click on these little like controls right here, and I'm going to decrease my amount of voice isolation. Usually for myself, I usually go down to about 15 or 20 or somewhere between those two because I've got a pretty decent microphone setup. All right. So that gets rid of any background noise. Like I've got a fan going right there. I've got a fan on the back of my camera right now. Something else happening in my house. All of that stuff could get picked up by this microphone. But if I turn on voice isolation, I get rid of all that extraneous noise. Next, I will go into dialogue leveling. And dialogue leveling on the baseline one, or the baseline one is a little aggressive. So I use my default, which says optimize moderate levels. And then I turn off lift soft dialogue because it's just a little too aggressive, I think, for me. So those are the changes that I made. And then I just saved that as my default. Next, I come down here to dynamics. Actually, before I do that, click on this, and this tells you what order will DaVinci Resolve do things in. So Right now it's set to run FX first, then dynamics, and then equalization. I prefer to do the bottom one, equalization first, then FX, then dynamics. Now, dynamics, let's talk about those dynamics. I'm going to double click on this. This is where you can do expanders, gates, compressors, and limiters, and I'm going to use this as a simple compressor. So I'm going to click up here to where it says default, and I'm going to say dialogue compression, and it's going to have some default stuff in there, but I need to find a spot where I'm talking, which I think I am right here. I'm looking at Bill VO right here, and then I can see the waveform right here. So I'm talking at that point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit play. Eventually, and I'm actually going to turn this down. I'm going to hit play, and you can see my output bouncing around right here. And what I want is for this to, right now it's hitting right around -20 when I'm talking. I want that to be up around -10. So I'm going to give it about 10 dB of makeup gain. So basically what's happening here is DaVinci Resolve is taking the loud parts of my dialogue, making them quieter, and then I am lifting everything back up so that the quiet parts of the dialogue are easier to hear, but the loud parts aren't like blowing your ears out. All right, so let me zoom in and find a spot where I'm talking again because I stopped. Here we go. So here you can see I'm talking, and as I look right here, it's hitting around -10, but it's going up a little bit above that. The thing that I've noticed is you cannot depend on this. You have to look down here at bus 1. Bus 1 is the thing that's going to be sent out to your final product at the end. You want that to hit around -10. At least that's what I aim for. So I'm watching right here, and I am hitting around -10. Sometimes I'm getting as loud as -5, but I'm hitting around -10 for the most part. So I think that that's pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. I'll stop that from playing. And next, I didn't stop. There we go. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is maybe a little bit of EQ. I'm not going to do the EQ in this particular video because this is already going to be a very long video. But if I was, I would come through here and I would do all of the normal equalization stuff that you would do in a video, but I would do that for each person individually. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. And then finally, if you are somebody who has some sibilance in your voice, where there's like S sounds are strong when you say things, people don't like the sound of that. So what I like to do is I like to click the plus right here. These are our effects. I'm going to come down here to restoration, and under VST, I use something called RX11 DS. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to click on spectral, and I don't change anything else. I just leave it alone, and it gets rid of the S sound. So I'm actually going to bring that back up so you can see what it looks like. So I'm going to hit play. And every time you see the blue show up here with a little negative, that's because I said the S sound, and it's lowering that frequency so it's less harsh on people's ears. So now that I've got that done, I'll stop that playing. What I will usually do is I will save that as a preset. So if you come up here to Fairlight and you go to presets library, you can save your own presets library. Now I'm going to show you how to apply them. So I'm going to click on this where it says equalizer presets, and I'm going to go to global track presets. And these are the ones that I've already saved. So instead of doing all of that stuff every single time, all I do is I say Bill SM7D at 7B, that's my microphone, RCP2, that's my Rodecaster Pro 2, which is my mixer. And then I'm going to, this is the preset that I made. I'm going to click on my voice and I hit apply, and it goes through and it applies all of the presets to my voice. Then I have one that I made for Carrie, who, if you look at Carrie's waveforms, they're huge compared to mine. And if you look at Russ's waveforms, it's almost impossible to see because Russ is a very, very quiet guy. Well, he didn't say much in the very beginning. Oh, here we go. So right here, you can see that Russ is saying he's just so quiet while he's talking. So I have different presets for each person on the show. So if I go back to my Fairlight and then my presets library, and then I click on Carry, and then I click on Carry VO, this is the preset over here on the left. This is the track that I'm going to apply it to. And I'm going to hit apply, and I want you to watch over here. You'll see that change here. I'll move this over so you can watch those at the same time. I'm going to hit apply. Bam. Now we have Carrie's stuff applied, although his voice is a little more inconsistent because of that condenser style microphone. So I'm going to click to where I see that he's talking, and I'm going to open up our dynamics, and I'm going to hit play. And I'm watching where he's landing. He's landing a little bit louder than I was. So I'm going to take his makeup gain and I'm going to bring it down a little bit more. All right. And he also has a limiter turned on. I'm actually going to turn that off and see how that handles it. All right, I think that that's pretty good. So now I'm going to go ahead and close that. I'm going to stop playing. I'm going to go back to my Fairlight presets library. I'm going to go to Rich VO, apply. It just applied his. I got to find a spot where he's talking, which is right here. He's talking right here. I can see that because it says Rich VO right here, and that's where he's talking. So I'm going to hit play. I'm going to open up this, and I'm just going to watch here and then over here. And it looks like he's pretty consistent. Actually, he needs a little bit more makeup gain because he's not ending up in the yellow very often. So I'm just going to give him a little bit more and see over here where it lands. I think he needs a little bit more. He's still a little bit quiet. All right, I think that that's pretty good. And then I'm going to do the same thing for Russ. So we'll go Fairlight, presets library, Russ global, Russ VO, apply. And now I got to find Russ. Close that. Find where he's talking. He's talking right here. And like I said here, actually, if I double click on Russ, you can see I'm getting the gain. I'm getting the limiter in there and then the gain reduction, and he is still hitting like between -15 and -10. So I need to give him just a little bit more because he's super, super quiet. But at the end, if you mix them all and they're all hitting the same levels, then you're going to be fine. All right. Now I can pause that. So now I have all of my audio set up the way that I want, and I'm ready to publish my podcast. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the deliver page. And I always make both an audio version and a video version. I upload the video version to YouTube. I also upload the video version to Spotify. And then I upload the audio version to Patreon so that patrons can, listen to the podcast without any ads in it. So I'm going to come over here to audio podcast. I'm going to click on this. This is a preset that I made. If you want to make presets, you just click on custom export, set up everything that you want the way that you want it. And then if you click the 3 dots, you can then say save as a new preset. All right. So I have 2 presets. I have my audio podcast preset. So I'll label this test or example podcast. And then I'll click on my browse. And we're going to go to YouTube projects. Nope. To YouTube over here on the left. Sorry. And then projects. And then how I edit my podcast, exports, save. But I messed up. So hold on. Audio podcast. I didn't click that. So now that I clicked that, it's not exporting the video, which is important. All right. So example podcast, and then I hit save, and then I just always check and make sure I don't have upload directly to YouTube. I'm going to add that to my render queue. So now it's getting ready to be delivered. And then I'm going to click on this where it says YouTube direct upload. I'm going to name it example podcast, and it's going to go to the exact same place as the last one. I'm going to turn off upload directly to YouTube unless you want to. And then I'm going to hit add to render queue. And now if you have one of these selected with a white bar around it, then it's only going to do that one. But if you click in this blank space right here, and then you click render all, it will go through and render both, so you can walk away and come back later when it's done. This podcast will typically take about 2 hours to render on my Mac. This is on an M3 MacBook Pro with 36 gigs of RAM. So it takes a long time to render these. If you want to do it via Riverside, it takes a lot less time, but you have a little bit less control. And I just am a control freak. So there you have it. But that's how I use DaVinci Resolve in order to edit my podcast. If you want to know more about the sponsor of this video, Riverside, I've got a video linked down below that you can check out. And thank you for watching. Hopefully I'll see you on the next one. Stay rad, everybody.